We the humans don't have rules for war, we never did. And if you thought we fought wrong, you're damn right. We did. You came with your codes of honor, you came with your treaties and your clean kills, your drones calculated probabilities, your fleets moved like chess pieces, elegant, predictable, sterile. But we are chaos-wearing skin. You didn't understand what it meant to fight a species born from extinction events, to challenge a race that clawed its way through ice ages, plagues, genocides, and gods. We murdered ourselves. We broke every rule because the rules never saved us. You saw our tactics and called them barbaric. We called them necessary. You saw our desperation. We called it survival. You saw us burn our own cities to starve your armies. We called it Tuesday. You thought war was something that could be contained, measured, refined, but we are the children of fire and famine. Our first weapon was a stone, our last is a whisper that turns planets into ash. You underestimated us, because we wear emotions like armor, because we scream when we charge, because we bury our dead and promise revenge. But we warned you, you came to conquer, and instead you awakened the worst of us, the unbreakable. The mad, the part of humanity that doesn't know how to lose, because losing means extinction. And we've faced that too many times already. You thought we'd surrender when the odds were low, but we don't do odds. We do last stands. We do scorched earth. We do if we go. We're taking you with us. So yeah, we don't have rules for war. We have legends. We have vengeance. We have nothing left to lose. And that's why you lost, because while you fought by the book, we tore out the last page and rewrote it in blood. They came to our world with their polished codes of war. Clean, efficient, clinical, like they were playing chess in the stars. Their fleets moved in patterns. Their drones followed algorithms. Every shot calculated. Every casualty accounted for. And then they met us. See, we don't fight like that. We never did. We fight like our backs are against the wall. Because, for most of our history, they were. We came from a world that tried to kill us every chance it got. Ice ages, diseases, our own kind turning on us. We didn't learn war in simulations. We learned it in blood, in fire, in screams echoing across crumbling cities. They called us reckless. We called it survival. They said we broke the rules, but we never had any. Rules never saved us. Instinct did. Madness did. Love, rage, revenge, that's what carried us through. They couldn't understand why we kept fighting, even when it was hopeless. Why we set traps with our own bones. Why we'd burn the sky just to blind their satellites. But to us, war isn't strategy. War is memory. It's the faces we lost. The homes we watched turn to ash. And when they thought they'd won, when the last human fleet drifted silent in the void, that's when we got dangerous. Because we're not here to win clean. We're here to survive dirty. To crawl through the mud if that's what it takes. To make sure that if we fall, they fall with us. So no, we don't have rules for war. We have scars. We have ghosts. And we have a promise whispered through clenched teeth. 1. Humanity doesn't fight by the book. We burn the book. Our wars were never clean. We never followed rules, because we weren't raised by peace. We were forged in chaos. 2. They fought with strategy. We fought with memory. For them, war was math. For us, it was the face of someone we loved. Gone. 3. They came to win. We came to survive. They brought fleets and protocols. We brought desperation, instinct, and a will that doesn't break. 4. We didn't learn war in simulations. We lived it from the ashes of burning cities and the silence of mass graves. We became what they feared. 5. No clean victories, only scorched earth and silent vows. We'd rather drag them down with us than see another genocide painted in silence. 6. Our rage is not reckless, it's historical. Every brutal move we make carries a legacy of being pushed to extinction too many times. 7. You can't understand us until you've lost like us. They didn't get it. Why we trap with bones, fight with fire, cry and kill in the same breath. 8. Humanity's power lies in having nothing left to lose. The most terrifying enemy isn't the strongest. It's the one with no way out but forward. 9. We are legends written in blood, not rules. Their histories are manuals. Ours are myths, carved in the stars by people who refused to die quietly. They thought we'd play their game. When the first of their warships broke through the edge of our system, it wasn't with fire. It was with formality. Broadcasts in 100 languages, declaring terms of engagement, diplomatic overtures wrapped in the cold etiquette of a culture that had never truly been threatened. They brought with them fleets designed with symmetry, polished to reflect stars, and minds trained in theoretical warfare. They expected formations, order, an opponent who'd stand across from them, salute the rules of combat, and engage like this was some kind of contest. But we didn't come from peace. We came from collapse. We didn't have the luxury of neat wars and clean borders. Our first wars were over food, over fire, over the right to live one more day. Our ancestors carved survival out of frostbitten stone and bled into the soil to keep a generation going. And when the empires came and we learned how to build guns and governments, nothing really changed. The world shifted, the weapons got louder, the stakes got higher, but the chaos remained. We weren't forged in strategy. We were born in fury. So when they arrived, expecting decorum, they didn't realize the mistake they had made. They called our response unprovoked. But what they didn't see was how many graves we already had, how many planets we'd lost to plague and war, to famine and greed and storms, how many children we buried before we ever looked to the stars. We didn't shoot first because we were cruel. We shot first because we knew what came next. Their fleets aligned in beautiful orbits, each movement a perfect line drawn across the black. We didn't bother with that. We launched from broken carriers and hidden moons. We struck from scrapyards and asteroid belts. We used what we had, what we always did, because that's what humanity is. Not a pristine army with medals and maps, but a wounded animal that knows how to make pain a weapon. They said we broke the rules of engagement, that we ambushed, flanked, lured, and decimated without mercy. But tell me, where were the rules when our skies burned? Where were their ethics when our children were choking on ash long before they ever heard our name? Rules never saved us. There's no rule that shields you from hunger, no treaty that protects you from extinction. The only law we ever learned was this: if you want to live, you have to fight like hell. So we did. We turned their precision into panic, their logic into fear. We lured their cruisers into gravity wells and detonated fusion cores in the dark. We overloaded systems with nothing but rage and old machines. They watched us sacrifice entire outposts just to draw them in, to show them we were willing to pay the price they never imagined. They couldn't comprehend it. They thought we were reckless, uncalculated, barbaric. But that's the thing about war. They mistook our madness for weakness. They didn't see that every time we broke a rule, it wasn't out of ignorance. It was because we knew. We knew what rules cost, and we were done paying. They wanted a war that made sense, that fit inside spreadsheets and predictions. But humanity has never made sense, not in peace, and sure as hell not in war. We are contradiction. We are the scream before silence. We are the flame that keeps burning after the air is gone. We don't fight fair, we fight final, because we don't believe in acceptable losses. To us, every loss is a story, a name, a life that mattered. Every soldier who falls becomes a promise that someone will answer for it. They fought to win. We fought because we had no other choice. And that's why we won. Not because we were stronger, not because we were smarter, but because when they showed up with rules, we showed them what it looked like when survival becomes fury. We showed them what it meant to be a species with no backup plan, no home to return to, no mercy left. So no, we don't have rules for war. We have instincts, we have memory, and we have a fire inside us that doesn't go out ever. And when we burn, we take everything with us. They couldn't understand why we fought the way we did. To them, war was a science, measured, predictable, contained. Every move calculated for maximum efficiency with minimal damage. They didn't just fight with weapons. They fought with restraint, protocols, precision. They truly believed war could be elegant, that even in bloodshed there was decorum, a moral code, limits. They thought we'd be impressed. They expected us to fall into formation, to meet them head on in the cold vacuum of space with our own neatly arranged fleets, to exchange fire in scheduled waves, like a duel between gentlemen. That's what they'd seen from other species. Civilized, respectful. They had no idea that what was coming at them wasn't a species that fought by rules, but one that had never had the luxury of them to begin with. See, they evolved in balance, on a world that provided just enough challenge to unify, just enough peace to thrive. They grew up believing safety was the default, that stability could be designed. And when they built their society, they kept that belief. War was a last resort, to be handled like surgery, clean, calculated, and distant. But we evolved under pressure. Our world tried to kill us every century, sometimes every year. Disease, floods, empires, ice, fire, famine. We didn't rise from the dirt. We crawled through it, biting, screaming, and refusing to die. Our civilizations rose from the ashes of others. Our languages carry the names of gods we buried. Every invention we made came at the cost of blood. Our peace was never given, we stole it. So when you think we fight wrong, you're missing the truth. We fight with rage, yes, but it's not blind, it's earned. It's layered with the memory of suffering, of promises broken, of generations told this is the end. And still we kept going. You can't teach that in a war college. You can't simulate it in a hologram. You have to live through it. You have to know what it feels like when the ground shakes and you don't know if your child is still alive. When you lose everything you built in a single flash of light. When your people are called savages for simply refusing to bow. So no, we didn't follow their code of honor. We lured their generals into civilian ruins because we knew they wouldn't fire. We used their mercy as bait because we knew they had limits. We pushed them past those limits because that's what survival requires. To them, that made us monsters. To us, it made us human. They said we didn't respect the battlefield, but they didn't understand. We carry our battlefield with us. It's in our hearts, our history, our homes. Every war we've fought, every loss we've taken is written in our DNA. So when we strike, we don't do it from discipline. We do it from memory, and that's what scared them the most. Not our weapons, not our tactics, but the terrifying realization that we would never stop, that we weren't playing to win, we were playing to end it, to make sure that even if we died, they would never forget who we were. They came expecting strategy. We gave them legacy. They came expecting control. We gave them chaos with a purpose. They came expecting war. We gave them humanity. And humanity, when cornered, doesn't fight clean. It fights forever. This is what they never saw coming. They thought we were reckless, that we acted without thought, without structure, without honor. They looked at the way we fought and saw chaos, desperation, even madness. And they weren't entirely wrong, but what they failed to understand, what they never could understand, is that there is a method to our madness, a rhythm to our rage. It's not carelessness, it's not savagery. It's instinct sharpened by history. It's survival written into our bones. They judged us by the way we threw ourselves into battle, how we charged into gunfire, how we sabotaged our own ships to destroy theirs, how we were willing to take losses they deemed unacceptable. But here's the truth. Those losses were never acceptable to us, either. We just didn't have the luxury to wait for clean solutions. Because while they measured war in percentages and projections, we measured it in faces. In names, in the hands we had to let go of to hold the line. They believed we lacked discipline. What we actually lacked was time. They could afford to retreat and regroup. They could afford to play the long game. We couldn't. Every second counted. Every mistake cost someone. Every hesitation echoed through our homes. So we moved fast. We hit hard. We adapted on the fly. And yes, we broke every rule along the way. Because when you're bleeding, you don't think about the rulebook. You think about staying alive. They had a word for how we fought. Irrational. But there is nothing irrational about refusing to die. There is nothing irrational about defending your people with everything you have. And when everything is all you have left, you use it. You don't wait for a better idea. You don't ask for permission. You act, and we acted, over and over again. Even when we were outnumbered, outgunned, outmaneuvered. Even when we were surrounded and suffocating. We found a way to keep fighting. They called it chaos, but it wasn't. It was grief turned into motion. Fear turned into strategy. Love turned into firepower. Every reckless charge they couldn't understand, that was a mother whose child died in the first strike. That was a brother holding the last letter from home. That was humanity saying you can kill us, but you will never beat us. Because the truth is, we were never trying to win their way. We weren't here to impress them with formations or restraint. We were here to end it, fast, brutally, permanently. And if that meant burning our own ships just to take out theirs, so be it. If that meant leading them into traps baited with our wounded, so be it. If that meant sacrificing 100 to save 1,000, we made that call, because we had to. They saw that and said, this isn't how war is supposed to be. And they were right. It's not supposed to be like this, but that's what happens when you push a species too far. When you come to their home, call them primitive and expect them to kneel. That's what happens when you mistake compassion for weakness and desperation for chaos. You learn the hard way that nothing is more dangerous than a human with no hope left but one. Make them pay, and we always do. They looked at our desperation and called it weakness. They saw our cities in ruin, our ships patched together with rust and prayer, and they thought they were seeing the end of a people too broken to stand. But they weren't looking at the end. They were looking at the beginning of their mistake, because what they thought was desperation wasn't, it was resolve. See, they had options, alliances, exit strategies, contingency plans written into every battle scenario. They could afford to retreat, to save face, to regroup and re-engage on better terms. We couldn't. We didn't have a backup plan. We didn't have another planet to run to. We didn't have anything left to lose, and that made us terrifying, because they were playing for victory. We were playing for survival. To them, we were collapsing, unstable, falling apart. To us, we were finally free, free of illusions, free of hope, free of all the weight that made us hesitate before. When you've got nothing, no resources, no future, no promises left, you become something else. You stop caring about the numbers, about strategy, about what's fair or smart or winnable. You just fight with everything you have, with everything you are, and that's what they never understood. They saw crumbling fleets and thought we were done. But we are the kind of species that fights best when we're cornered. We evolve under pressure. We become monsters when we must, not because we want to, but because we refuse to be erased. They couldn't comprehend that. Their people never faced extinction. Not really. They had always known stability. They had rules. We had rage. They had order. We had scars. They had a playbook. We had the will to crawl through hell and come out swinging. They thought our desperation made us careless, but it didn't. It made us unpredictable. It made us dangerous. Because when you fight like your survival is the only thing that matters, you do what they never dared to. You burn bridges just to light the battlefield. You detonate your own escape pods to blind their sensors. You drag their captains down with your dying breath, just to remind them that humans never go quietly. Desperation didn't make us weaker. It made us real, because in that desperation lived everything they'd forgotten how to feel. Grief, fury, hope twisted into a weapon. In our collapse, we found a purity they couldn't touch, a rawness they couldn't replicate, a force of will so brutal, so stubborn, so painfully human, that it shattered every rule they thought would hold us down. They were still planning their next move. We had already decided we'd rather die on fire than live on our knees. They called us barbaric, not because we slaughtered needlessly, not because we tortured or defiled, but because we refused to fight like them, because we didn't respect the quiet ceremonies they clung to, the ones that made war seem clean, predictable, contained. They watched us fight and saw fire where they expected formation. They saw smoke and ruin and fury where there should have been discipline. But that's because they never understood what war really meant to us. To them, it was an extension of diplomacy. To us, it was the shadow of history, a curse we've carried since before we learned to write. We didn't come to war dressed in honor. We came wrapped in the names of those who didn't survive the last one. You see, every time we launch a missile, it carries the scream of a mother. Every time we tear through their ranks, it's not just a tactic, it's a reckoning. Because when we fight, we don't think about strategy first. We think about the people we've lost. We don't fight from a podium, we fight from memory, and our memories are violent. They couldn't understand why we burned our own cities to keep them from falling into enemy hands, why we turned oceans into death traps, or let our own soldiers detonate on impact to take down their clean, untouchable command ships. They thought it was madness, that we were unstable, but it wasn't madness. It was clarity. It was us saying, you don't get to erase us, not again, not ever. We remember what it's like to be powerless, to watch an empire draw lines across your land and call it peace, to see your culture rewritten, your leaders hanged, your children grow up without names for the things their ancestors once built. So no, we don't fight for honor. We fight so no one ever forgets what it cost us to exist. They wanted rules, codes, mutual respect. But we learned the hard way. Respect isn't given in war. It's taken with blood, with fire, with unforgiving intent. And when they came expecting civilized resistance, they found us instead. Raw, violent, unapologetic, not because we wanted to be, but because history made us this way. We don't worship war, we remember it, and we make sure they do too. They saw our tactics and thought we were unhinged, unpredictable, irrational. What they didn't realize was that every move we made, every reckless maneuver, every suicidal strike, was a message, a warning etched into the void. Because we don't fight to impress. We don't fight for applause. We fight so the enemy never forgets. They studied our battles like puzzles. They couldn't make sense of us. Why we would detonate entire space stations just to destroy a single enemy ship. Why we'd sacrifice thousands to buy 10 seconds. Why we'd collapse orbital platforms onto our own cities just to take the enemy with us. To them, it was insanity. To us, it was necessary. You can't reason with a species that has tasted genocide. You can't outplay a people who've buried planets. When survival is your only goal, every other consideration burns away. Pride, rules, reputation. All that's left is the question. Will we live long enough to make them bleed? And we always made them bleed, because we weren't fighting for territory, or ideology, or resources. We were fighting for memory. We wanted them to remember the humans who refused to die, the ones who fought with broken machines and bare hands, the ones who screamed into the dark and lit it up anyway, the ones who took their rules and shattered them like glass. We wanted their children to study our tactics in horror, to ask, why would anyone do that? And to hear the answer whispered in every scar left behind, because we had no choice. Because surrender was never an option, because they gave us nothing to lose. We weren't trying to be clever, we were trying to be unforgettable, because we knew that one day the battles would end, and when that day came, we didn't want a footnote in their archives. We wanted them to choke on the memory of us, to flinch at the sight of a human face, to remember that when we fought with the fury of a species dragged through hell and back, and we didn't care what it cost. Because our legacy would not be written in treaties, it would be written in terror, and it would last forever. They came expecting logic. They thought we'd see the odds, run the calculations, and surrender when the numbers turned against us. That we'd understand the inevitability of defeat, accept it even. They thought their superior firepower, their vast fleets, their endless supply chains would be enough to force us to bow. But they misunderstood something fundamental about us. We don't do odds, we do last stands, we do one-way missions. We do if we go down, we're taking you with us, because humans, real humans, don't quit when the math says it's over. We fight harder, and that's what terrified them the most. They couldn't figure out why we kept fighting. Why, even when we were outnumbered 100-1, we still charged. Why, when our homeworlds were burning, we sent more soldiers into the fire. Why we kept rising again and again from the rubble they left behind. They thought it was insanity. It was refusal. A refusal to be erased. A refusal to let our species fade into history as a conquered name. A refusal to let our children grow up under someone else's flag. Because once you've lost everything, fear has no hold on you, and we had lost everything. That's why we were so dangerous. They came expecting a war of attrition, thinking we'd bleed out and beg for mercy. Instead, they found a people who had already bled, and kept walking. We weren't fighting to survive another day. We were fighting to make sure they never slept soundly again. We taught them the meaning of defiance, of what it looks like when a species is pushed past every breaking point, and still doesn't break. We showed them that courage isn't born in strategy. It's born in fire, in loss, in love buried under rubble and rage carved into bone. They kept waiting for us to quit. We never did, because humans don't stop when the odds turn. We become the odds, and we never back down.